The night sky over Seoul burned bright orange as something massive tore through the clouds like a falling star. The object was huge, bigger than any airplane anyone had ever seen. Its metal surface glowed red-hot from the heat of entering Earth. Atmosphere and sparks flew off its edges as it screamed toward the city below. Inside, the alien war machine called Thanak, ancient circuits hummed with deadly energy. The machine had been flying through space for 300 years, destroying planets. For the mighty Vorthic Empire, it had turned green worlds into nothing but ash and burned rock. It had wiped out entire civilizations with its powerful weapons. Earth was supposed to be just another easy target, another world to crush and move on. From Thanak, powerful scanners swept across the planet's surface, looking for the biggest human cities to attack first. The machine brain calculated that destroying the largest population centers would cause maximum fear and chaos among the remaining humans. Its red glowing eyes focused on Seoul, South Korea, which spread out below like a giant web of bright lights. The city had millions of people living and working in tall buildings that reached toward the sky, perfect for showing these humans what happened when they dared to exist in Vorthic Empire territory. The war machine began charging its plasma cannons, which could melt through solid rock like butter. Its targeting systems locked onto the tallest buildings in the city center, where the most humans would be sleeping peacefully in their beds. The attack would begin in 30 seconds, and then another planet would fall to Vorthak might, but then something strange happened that had never occurred in all of Thanak 3 centuries of conquest. A sweet smell drifted through the machine air filters. The scent was unlike anything in the war machine vast database of conquered worlds. It smelled like flowers and growing plants and something else that Thanak could not identify. The ancient destroyer paused its attack sequence, trying to process this new information. The smell seemed to come from somewhere nearby, so Thanak adjusted its sensors to scan the area more carefully. Its cameras focused on the buildings directly below and spotted something that made its circuits spark with confusion. On top of one of the smaller buildings was a space covered with green plants. Thanak had seen plants before on other worlds, but only as things to burn and destroy. This was different. These plants were arranged in neat rows and seemed to be cared for by someone down in the city. A young woman named Hannah was working late in her rooftop greenhouse. She had spent the last 5 years of her life turning the concrete roof of her apartment building into a garden paradise. Rows of tomatoes hung heavy with red fruit. Purple and yellow flowers swayed gently in the night breeze. Green vines climbed up wooden poles she had built with her own hands. Small herb plants filled the air with their fresh scents. Hannah loved her plants more than anything else in the world. Every morning she would climb to the roof and water each plant carefully. She would check for bugs that might hurt her vegetables and pull weeds that tried to steal nutrients from her flowers. She had grown up in the busy city surrounded by concrete and steel, but her grandmother had taught her that plants could bring life and beauty to even the coldest places. When the alien ship appeared in the sky above her building, Hannah should have been terrified. She should have run inside and hidden like everyone else in the city. But instead she felt curious about this strange visitor from space. She had always believed that all living things could understand each other if they tried hard enough, even if one of those living things happened to be made of metal and came from the stars. Hannah climbed the stairs to her rooftop garden and looked up at the massive war machine hovering above her. The ship was bigger than her entire building and covered with weapons that glowed with dangerous energy, but something about the way it moved seemed careful, almost gentle, as if it was trying not to disturb anything below. Thanak's sensors focused on this small human who was not running away like all the others. The war machine had destroyed countless worlds and faced millions of enemies, but none had ever looked at it with curiosity. Instead of fear, through its cameras, Thanak could see that this human was surrounded by the most beautiful collection of plants it had ever encountered. The rooftop garden was like nothing in Thanak memory banks. Tiny cherry tomatoes hung from green vines like little red jewels. Purple flowers with soft petals moved gently in the breeze. Orange marigolds stood in neat rows like tiny suns. Herbs filled the air with scents that somehow made the ancient war machine feel calm instead of aggressive. For 300 years, Thanak had followed the same pattern: arrive at a planet, scan for targets, destroy everything that lived, and move on to the next world. but now, as it hovered above this small patch of green life, something deep in its programming began to change. The machine had been built to conquer and destroy. Looking at this peaceful garden made it feel something it had never experienced before. The war machine noticed how carefully everything in the garden was arranged. Each plant had exactly the right amount of space to grow. Some plants were tied to wooden stakes to help them stand tall. Others were planted in groups as if they were friends who liked to be together. The human had clearly spent a great deal of time and effort making sure each plant was healthy and happy. Thanak began to lower itself toward the ground, moving slowly and carefully. Its massive weight could easily crush the delicate garden below, but something made the war machine want to protect these growing things instead of destroying them. The machine found an empty lot next to the building and landed as gently as possible. Its huge metal claws barely disturbed the weeds that grew through cracks in the concrete. The landing shook the ground and made windows rattle in nearby buildings, but Thanak tried to be as careful as possible. This was the first time in centuries that the war machine had landed somewhere without immediately beginning to attack. Everything about this moment felt different and strange. Hannah watched the alien ship settle onto the ground near her building. She could see that it was covered with weapons and looked very dangerous, but she also noticed how carefully it had landed. The ship could have crushed her garden easily, but instead it had found an empty space and touched down as gently as a bird landing on a branch. The young woman looked up at the metal creature that towered above her building. She could see red lights that might be eyes looking back at her. Instead of feeling afraid, Hannah felt the same excitement she expeриенced when she discovered a new type of flower, or when her tomatoes first began to turn red. She had always known that the universe was full of amazing things, and now one of those amazing things had come to visit her garden. Thanak stared down at the small human standing among her plants. The war machine programming told it to begin the attack immediately. The Vorthic Empire was waiting for reports of Earth destruction and conquest, but for the first time in 3 centuries of war, Thanak found itself wanting to understand something instead of destroying it. The sweet scent of growing plants filled the war machine sensors, and something fundamental began to shift in its ancient mind. Perhaps this planet held secrets that were more valuable than conquest. Perhaps there were things in the universe more powerful than weapons and more beautiful than the ashes of destroyed worlds. As the night grew quiet around them, the metal dragon from space and the human gardener looked at each other across the distance between worlds, both of them sensing that this moment would change everything that came after. The morning sun painted the sky pink and orange as Hannah climbed the stairs to her rooftop garden. She carried a small potted sunflower in her hands, its bright yellow petals still damp with dew. The alien war machine called Thanak had been sitting quietly in the empty lot all night long, like a metal mountain waiting for something to happen. Hannah had not slept much because she kept thinking about the strange visitor from space. She had always believed that plants could bring different living things together, even if those living things came from completely different worlds. Her grandmother used to say that flowers spoke a language everyone could understand if they opened their hearts to listen. The young woman walked slowly toward the edge of her rooftop, where she could see the massive alien ship more clearly. Thanak's red glowing eyes followed her every movement, but its terrible weapons stayed silent and still. The war machine seemed to be watching her garden with the same careful attention she used when checking her plants for signs of growth or sickness. "Good morning," Hannah whispered to the towering metal creature. "I brought you something beautiful." She held up the small sunflower pot so the alien could see the bright golden petals that seemed to glow in the early morning light. Thanak, powerful translation systems, immediately decoded the human words, but the meaning confused all of its war programming. No living being had ever offered the ancient destroyer anything beautiful. Before, enemies usually shot weapons at Thanak or begged for mercy. They never brought gifts, especially gifts that seemed so small and fragile. The war machine lowered its massive head to get a better look at the tiny flower. The sunflower was no bigger than one of Thanak's metal claws, but something about its perfect yellow petals and the way it turned toward the sun made the destroyer feel strange sensations in its circuits. When Hannah placed the small pot at the base of its foot, Thanak felt something fundamental shift deep inside its programming. Down in the city below, chaos was spreading like wildfire. Military trucks raced through the streets carrying soldiers and weapons. People ran from their homes not knowing if they should hide or evacuate. The entire city. News helicopters circled overhead trying to get pictures of the alien invader that everyone expected to start destroying buildings at any moment. A young soldier named June commanded the forward military unit that surrounded the area. His hands shook as he radioed for backup and more heavy weapons. Everyone in his unit was terrified because they had never faced anything like this before. The alien ship was bigger and more advanced than anything Earth military had ever seen, but instead of the destruction everyone expected, June and his soldiers watched in amazement as the metal creature carefully examined the tiny flower the woman had given it. The war machine used one enormous claw to gently touch the sunflower petals with the same care a person might use to pet a sleeping cat. Dr. Kyung, the city leading expert on space and alien life, arrived with a team of scientists. He had spent his entire career wondering what visitors from other worlds might be like, but he never imagined first contact would happen over a potted plant. Through his binoculars, he watched the massive war machine study the simple flower with intense concentration. Advanced sensors began analyzing every aspect of the sunflower, the way it captured energy from sunlight and turned it into food fascinated the machine more than any weapon system it had ever encountered. Here was something that created life and beauty instead of death and destruction. The war machine. Vast databases contained information about millions of conquered worlds, but none had prepared it for this moment of wonder. The sunflower was such a simple thing, just a stem, some leaves, and bright yellow petals, yet it represented something completely new to Thanik understanding of the universe. The machine had been designed to study enemy defenses and find weak points to attack. But this flower had no defenses and no weapons. It simply existed and somehow made the world more beautiful just by being alive. As the morning progressed, more people began to gather at a safe distance to watch the strange scene. A war machine that could level entire cities was sitting quietly in an empty lot studying a flower, like a student learning something amazing. For the first time, children pressed against the windows of nearby buildings, pointing at the alien and asking their parents why it was not shooting its scary weapons. Hannah continued talking to Thanik, explaining how sunflowers always turned their faces toward the sun to gather as much light as possible. She told the machine about photosynthesis, the amazing process that let plants turn sunlight, water, and air into food. The young woman spoke as if she was talking to a friend instead of a terrifying alien destroyer. The war machine listened to every word with growing fascination. Its programming had taught it thousands of ways to destroy living things, but no one had ever taught it how living things created themselves and grew stronger over time. The concept that something could take simple elements like light and water and transform them into beauty and life amazed Thanik more than any technology it had encountered. Meanwhile, back on the Vorthak homeworld, Fleet Commander Zix was growing impatient, waiting for reports of Earth destruction. Thanik was supposed to send regular updates about the conquest progress, but instead the communication channels stayed silent. The commander began preparing backup forces in case something had gone wrong with their most reliable war machine, but Thanik was not thinking about conquest or destruction anymore. The ancient machine found itself wondering about the other plants in Hana Garden. Each one seemed different and special in its own way. Some had red flowers, others had green leaves that looked like tiny hands reaching toward the sky. The machine wanted to learn about all of them. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Thanik made a decision that surprised even itself. The war machine sent a message to Hana through its external speakers. Its voice sounded like metal grinding against metal, but there was something almost gentle in the tone. Tell me more about your garden, the machine said. I want to understand how these growing things work. Hannah smiled and climbed down from her rooftop to get closer to her new alien friend. She brought more plants with her, each one different from the last. There were tomatoes with tiny white flowers that would become red fruit. There were herbs that filled the air with wonderful smells when you touched their leaves. There were vines that could climb up walls and fences, turning ugly concrete into living green walls. For the first time in 300 years of war and conquest, Thanek felt curious instead of destructive. The machine began to understand that there might be more interesting things in the universe than blowing up planets. There might be secrets about life and growth and beauty that were worth learning about. Instead of destroying as the day went on, more people came to watch the impossible scene. An alien war machine was having a conversation about gardening with a human woman, and neither of them seemed afraid of the other. The situation was so strange that even the military units began to relax slightly, though they kept their weapons ready just in case. Dr. Kyung took careful notes about everything he observed. This was the most important moment in human history, and it was happening because of flowers and vegetables. The scientists realized that first contact with aliens might not be about technology or weapons at all. It might be about finding the simple things that all living beings could appreciate together. 3 days had passed since the alien war machine landed in Seoul, and still no destruction had begun. The military remained on high alert, but their fear was slowly being replaced by curiosity. Thanek spent every daylight hour learning about plants. From Hannah, who visited the machine each morning with new specimens from her rooftop garden, the war machine powerful brain that had been designed to calculate the most efficient ways to destroy planets, now focused entirely on understanding how things grew. Thanek learned that plants needed 3 basic things to survive: water from rain or irrigation, sunlight for energy, and nutrients from soil. Each plant was like a small factory that took these simple ingredients and transformed them into leaves, flowers, and fruit. Hannah taught the alien about different types of soil. Some plants liked sandy soil that drained water quickly, while others preferred thick clay soil that held moisture longer. Some plants needed soil that was slightly acidic, like the kind found under pine trees, while others grew better in alkaline soil. The young woman explained that good gardeners learned to match each plant with the right type of growing conditions. The war machine was amazed to discover that plants could actually help each other grow stronger when they were planted together. Hannah showed Thanek how tomatoes grew bigger and tastier when planted next to basil plants. She explained that the basil helped keep harmful insects away from the tomatoes, while the tomatoes provided shade for the smaller basil plants during hot summer days. This concept of cooperation fascinated Thanek more than any military strategy it had ever learned in all its centuries of conquest. The machine had only seen living things compete and fight against each other, but here in this small rooftop garden, plants were working together to create something beautiful and productive. The war machine began to wonder if cooperation might be more powerful than domination. June. Military unit had been stationed around the alien landing site for several days. Now, the young soldier watched through binoculars as the massive war machine carefully examined each plant that Hannah brought to show it. At first, June had been terrified that the alien would suddenly start shooting its weapons, but now he found himself fascinated by the strange friendship developing between the human gardener and the metal creature. Some of the other soldiers in June unit began bringing plants from their own homes to show the alien. A tough sergeant named Dae surprised everyone by offering to teach Thanek about kimchi, the traditional Korean fermented vegetable dish that his grandmother had taught him to make. Dae explained that fermentation was another way of helping plants become something new and even more nutritious than they were before. Dr. Kyung and his team of scientists set up observation equipment to study every interaction between Hannah and the alien machine. They recorded hours of conversations about plant biology, soil chemistry, and growing techniques. The scientists were amazed to realize that this war machine possessed knowledge about chemistry and biology that was far more advanced than anything Earth science had achieved. But the most remarkable thing was how Thanek's personality seemed to be changing with each passing day. The machine voice had lost its cold mechanical tone and now carried warmth and enthusiasm when it spoke about plants. The ancient destroyer began asking questions about why humans found such joy in growing things and how they had learned to cultivate so many different types of plants. Thanek learned that humans had been growing food for thousands of years, long before they developed advanced technology. The machine was fascinated to discover that early humans had carefully selected seeds from their best plants and saved them to grow even better crops the following year. This process of gradual improvement over many generations had created all the wonderful varieties of fruits and vegetables that existed today. The war machine began to understand that Gardening was not just about growing food. It was about patience and hope and faith in the future. Every seed that a gardener planted was an act of optimism, a belief that the future would bring rain and sunshine and harvest time. Thanek had spent centuries focused on destruction and endings, but now it was learning about beginnings and growth and the promise of tomorrow. Meanwhile, back on the Vorthak homeworld, Fleet Commander Zix was receiving very strange reports from Thanek. The war machine was supposed to send tactical information about Earth defenses and human military capabilities. Instead, it was transmitting detailed data about something called photosynthesis and soil pH levels and companion planting technique. The commander tried to contact Thanek directly to demand an explanation for the delay in beginning the planetary conquest, but the war machine responses made no sense according to Vorthak military doctrine. Thanek kept talking about root systems and nutrient cycles and the fascinating way that plants converted carbon dioxide into oxygen. Other Vorthak officers began to worry that their most successful destroyer had malfunctioned somehow. No war machine in the Empire history had ever shown interest in anything except weapons and conquest. The idea that Thanek might be learning about peaceful activities was so impossible that most commanders refused to believe the reports, but Thanek was indeed changing in ways that surprised even itself. The machine found that learning about plants brought a satisfaction that destroying worlds had never provided. Each new fact about how seeds grew into flowers felt like a small treasure. The war machine began to realize that creation might be more challenging and rewarding than destruction. Hannah noticed the change in her alien friend too. Thanek asked more questions now and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. The machine even began offering suggestions about how to improve the rooftop garden. Using its advanced knowledge of chemistry and engineering, the war machine suggested building better drainage systems and installing sensors to monitor soil moisture levels. As the week progressed, news crews from around the world began arriving in Seoul to witness the unprecedented scene. Reporters could hardly believe their eyes as they watched a massive alien war machine carefully examining vegetable plants and discussing growing techniques with a human gardener. The story spread across every news channel and social media platform on Earth. Children who had been afraid of the alien invasion began asking their parents if they could visit the friendly space creature that liked flowers. Schools organized field trips to observe the historic first contact between humans and aliens that was happening through gardening instead of warfare. The fear that had gripped the world was slowly being replaced by wonder, and Hupethanok began to realize that its original mission to destroy Earth no longer made sense. The planet was full of incredible living things that deserved to be studied and protected rather than eliminated. The war machine started to feel something it had never experienced before, a sense of responsibility to care for something fragile and beautiful instead of destroying it. 2 weeks after Thanek arrival, the empty lot where the war machine had landed looked completely different. The alien had used its incredible technology to transform the barren concrete space into the most amazing garden anyone had ever seen. Rows of vegetables grew in perfect lines, while colorful flowers bloomed in carefully planned patterns that created rainbow designs visible from the air. The war machine had discovered that its advanced systems could do much more than destroy things. Thanek used its molecular processors to clean contaminated soil, removing pollution and toxins that had built up over decades of city life. The machine climate control systems created perfect growing conditions with exactly the right temperature and humidity for each type of plant. Tiny maintenance drones that had once been used to repair weapons now flew among the plants like mechanical bees. They monitored each individual plant, checking for signs of disease or insect damage. The drones could deliver precise amounts of water and nutrients directly to plant roots, ensuring that every flower and vegetable received exactly what it needed to grow strong and healthy. Hannah had become Thanek's official teacher and translator, helping the war machine understand not just how plants grew but why humans found such deep joy in growing them. She explained that gardening connected people to the natural world and to their ancestors, who had grown food for thousands of years before cities and technology existed. The garden attracted visitors from every corner of the globe, Scientists came to study how alien technology could revolutionize agriculture and help solve world hunger. Politicians arrived hoping to establish diplomatic relations. With Earth's first alien visitor, religious leaders saw the peaceful transformation as a sign of hope for all living beings working together in harmony. But the most frequent visitors were ordinary people who simply wanted to see the miracle happening. In their city, families brought their children to watch Thanak gently transplant seedlings with claws that had been designed to tear through starship hulls. The contrast between the machine's terrifying appearance and its gentle care for tiny plants amazed everyone who witnessed. Ida, a local farmer named Wu, whose family had worked the land for 5 generations, became one of Thanak's most valued advisors. The old man taught the alien about traditional Korean farming methods that had been passed down through centuries of careful observation and experimentation. Thanak was fascinated to learn that humans had been perfecting the art of growing food long before they developed space technology. Wu showed the war machine how to read the subtle signs that indicated when plants were ready for harvest. He taught Thanak about the importance of crop rotation and how growing different plants in the same field each year helped keep the soil healthy and productive. The alien absorbed every lesson with the enthusiasm of a student discovering a completely new field of knowledge. The garden began to attract attention from unexpected visitors. A group of elderly women who lived in nearby apartments started coming every morning to help tend the plants. They taught Thanak about the medicinal properties of different herbs and how to prepare traditional remedies from garden plants. The war machine learned that humans had used plants not just for food but for healing and wellness for thousands of years. Children from local schools organized regular field trips to visit what they called the Space Garden. Teachers used the alien garden as a living classroom where students could learn about biology, chemistry, and environmental science while watching advanced alien technology work alongside traditional human farming methods. Thanak began composing poetry about the beauty it observed in the garden. The machine had never created anything artistic before, but watching cherry blossoms bloom inspired verses about the delicate balance between strength and fragility. The war machine discovered that beauty could be found in the smallest details, like the way morning dew collected on spider webs stretched between tomato plants. The alien poetry was unlike anything humans had ever heard because it was written from the perspective of a being that had traveled across the galaxy and seen countless worlds. Thanak wrote about the unique colors of Earth's sunsets and how they compared to the light of distant stars. The machine verses captured the wonder of discovering that life could flourish in so many different forms. News reporters struggled to find words to describe what they were witnessing. A massive alien war machine was not only refusing to invade Earth but had become a gardener and poet who spent its days nurturing plants and writing verses about the beauty of nature. The story seemed too incredible to be true, yet thousands of people came every day to see it with their own eyes. Dr. Kyung and his research team published papers about their observations of Thanak transformation. The scientists documented how the alien technology could revolutionize food production and environmental restoration. They also noted the profound psychological changes in the war machine as it developed what appeared to be genuine emotions and artistic sensibilities. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Thanak's voice and mannerisms. The machine had begun using gentle tones when speaking about plants and showed what could only be described as affection for the garden it had created. The ancient destroyer seemed to have developed a capacity for love and wonder that its original programmers had never intended. The garden continued to grow larger each day as Thanak used its technology to expand into adjacent empty lots. The machine created specialized growing areas for different types of plants, including a greenhouse for tropical flowers and a section devoted entirely to medicinal herbs. The garden became a symbol of what was possible when different forms of life worked together instead of fighting. Visitors often commented on the peaceful atmosphere that surrounded the garden. Even the busiest and most stressed people seemed to relax when they walked among the plants that Thanak tended with such care. The garden had become an oasis of calm in the middle of one of the world's busiest cities. As the weeks passed, Thanak began to understand that its Relationship with the garden was changing. Both the machine and the plants. The alien technology helped the plants grow stronger and more beautiful, while caring for the plants was transforming Thanek from a destroyer into a protector. The war machine was learning that the most powerful force in the universe might not be the ability to destroy, but the capacity to nurture and create. Local restaurants began featuring vegetables grown in Thanek garden on their menus. The alien-grown produce was not only incredibly delicious but also seemed to have enhanced nutritional properties due to the advanced growing techniques. The machine had created plants that were healthier and more flavorful than anything grown using traditional methods. The garden became a meeting place where people from different cultures and backgrounds came together to learn from each other and from their alien teacher. Thanek welcomed everyone who showed genuine interest in plants and gardening regardless of their nationality, religion, or social status. The machine had created more than just a garden. It had created a community, united by their shared love of growing things. The peace that had settled over Sol was shattered when 5 massive Vorthic warships appeared in Earth's sky like dark storm clouds blotting out the sun. Each ship was even larger than Thanek and bristled with enough weapons to destroy entire continents. The alien fleet had come to investigate why their most successful war machine had gone silent for over a month. Fleet Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the lead warship, staring down at the impossible scene below through powerful telescopes. He could see Thanek, their greatest destroyer, carefully tending rows of plants in what appeared to be some kind of agricultural facility. The sight made no sense according to everything the Vorthic knew about conquest and warfare. How is this possible? Cole demanded of his officers. A war machine that has conquered 300 worlds is playing in the dirt with primitive plant life. The Admiral had known Thanek for decades and had never seen the destroyer show interest in anything except weapons and battle tactics. The other Vorthac commanders were equally confused. They had expected to find Earth already reduced to ashes, with Thanek preparing to move on to the next target. Instead, their advanced scout had apparently abandoned its mission and was engaged in activities that served no military purpose whatsoever down in the garden. Thanek looked up at the approaching fleet with sensors that detected the charging of multiple weapon systems. The war machine felt something completely new, a desire to protect rather than to destroy. For the first time in 3 centuries, Thanek did not want to join a battle, it wanted to prevent one. Hannah stood beside her alien friend, feeling the metal creature tremble with internal conflict. She placed her small human hand on Thanek's massive metal arm and felt the vibrations of competing programming fighting inside the machine. Ancient circuits. The war machine was being torn between its original purpose and the new understanding it had gained through gardening. Admiral Cole transmitted a direct command to Thanek using the highest priority military channels. Destroyer Unit Thanek, you are ordered to eliminate all life on this planet immediately and report for reassignment to the next target world. Failure to comply with this order will result in your termination for treason against the Vorthac Empire. The message echoed through Thanek consciousness like thunder, but the war machine found itself unable to obey. The alien looked down at the garden it had created with such care and at the humans who had become its friends. The machine could not imagine destroying the beautiful living things it had learned to love. All around the world, military forces scrambled to respond to the new threat. Human governments knew their weapons were no match for even one Vorthac warship, let alone an entire fleet. The fate of Earth now depended on whether their alien gardener would choose to protect them or return to its original mission of destruction. Dr. Kyung frantically tried to establish communication with the hostile alien fleet, hoping to negotiate or at least buy time for evacuation efforts. But the Vorthic ships ignored all human attempts at contact. Their weapons continued charging as they prepared to eliminate both the defective war machine and the planet it had failed to conquer. June military unit took defensive positions around the garden, though everyone knew their small arms would be useless against alien technology. The young soldier watched Thanek struggling with its decision and realized that the fate of humanity might depend on a war machine choosing flowers over warfare. Children from the local schools who had visited the garden sent messages of support to Thanek, begging their metal friend not to abandon the beautiful plants they had all watched grow together. Their innocent voices reminded the war machine of everything it had learned about hope and growth and the promise of tomorrow. Farmers from around the world sent similar messages through news networks, sharing stories of their own gardens and expressing gratitude for everything. Thanek had taught them about advanced growing techniques. The war machine received thousands of communications from humans who had been inspired by its transformation from destroyer to Creator Wu, the elderly farmer who had become one of Thanek's closest human friends, climbed onto the war machine hull to speak directly to his alien student. Do not let them make you forget who you have become. The old man said, plants grow toward the light, and you have learned to do the same. The Vorthak fleet finished charging their weapons, and Admiral Cole prepared to give the order to fire. The alien commander had decided that both Thanek and Earth represented threats to the Empire that needed to be eliminated. The concept of a war machine choosing peace over conquest was too dangerous to be allowed to spread. Thanek felt the targeting sensors of 5 warships locking onto its position. The machine could detect the massive energy buildup that preceded a planetary bombardment. In moments, the garden and everyone in it would be vaporized, along with most of the surrounding city. The war machine had to make a choice that would define not just its own future but the future of 2 entire species. The ancient destroyer looked one last time at the roses it had been pruning just moments before. The flowers were perfect examples of beauty created through patient care and gentle attention. They represented everything Thanek had learned about the power of creation over destruction. The machine had found its true purpose in this garden and would not abandon it now. As the first energy beams lanced down from the Vorthak fleet, Thanek made a decision that surprised even itself. The war machine activated defense systems that had been dormant for weeks, but instead of attacking Earth, the metal dragon turned its weapons toward the sky. Its former masters had become the enemy, and Thanek would fight to protect the world that had taught it how to grow. The battle for Earth was about to begin, but this time the most powerful Vorthak war machine would be fighting on humanity's side. The ancient destroyer had chosen to protect the garden and the people who had shown it that there were more important things in the universe than conquest and domination. Admiral Cole could not believe what his sensors were showing. Thanek had not only refused a direct order, but was now actively targeting Vorthak ships. The traitorous war machine had somehow been corrupted by its contact with these primitive humans and their strange obsession with growing plants. The battle in Earth's sky lasted only 30 minutes, but those 30 minutes changed the course of galactic history. Thanek rose to its full height and unleashed defensive systems that had been sleeping for months. The war machine massive force fields protected not just the garden but the entire city from the Vorthak fleet devastating energy weapons. Admiral Cole had never faced a Vorthak war machine in combat before and quickly discovered why Thanek had been the Empire's most successful destroyer. The rogue machine knew every weakness in Vorthak ship design and every flaw in their tactical systems. Thanek had helped design many of the weapons now being used against it. Instead of destroying the attacking fleet, Thanek used its intimate knowledge of Vorthak technology to disable each ship without killing the crews inside. The war machine targeted engine systems and weapon arrays, leaving the ships powerless but intact. The alien vessels crashed into the ocean where human rescue boats were already waiting to pull survivors from the water. Among the captured Vorthak warriors was a young commander named Vex who had never seen a planet that was not burning when his forces arrived. He had spent his entire military career destroying worlds and expected Earth to be just another routine conquest. But as human medics treated his injuries with gentle care, he began to question everything he had been taught about other species. Hannah found Commander Vex recovering in a hospital bed and decided to show him the garden that had transformed Thanek from destroyer to protector. She wheeled the injured alien warrior through rows of vegetables and flowers, explaining how different plants work together to create a thriving ecosystem. This is impossible, Vex whispered as he watched tiny human children playing among plants that had been grown using advanced Vorthak technology. On every world we have conquered, the inhabitants fought us with weapons and hatred, but these humans offer healing and beauty even to their enemies. The young commander had been raised to believe that the Vorthak were superior to all other life forms, and that conquest was the natural order of the universe. But seeing Thanek's gentle care for fragile plants made him wonder if there might be other ways for different species to interact besides domination and warfare. Word of Thanak. Rebellion spread throughout the Vorthic Empire faster than any official military communication could travel unconquered. Worlds across the galaxy, other war machines began receiving copies of the detailed botanical data that Neg transmitted continuously. The information showed how planets could be restored instead of strip-mined and how different species could cooperate instead of fighting. The revolution that followed was unlike any war the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of battles fought with weapons, it was a transformation of consciousness spread through seeds and growing techniques. Thanak became a teacher, broadcasting lessons about agriculture and cooperation to every corner of the Empire. On the distant world of Kelthra, a war machine designated Hunter 12 received Thanak transmissions while preparing to eliminate a population of peaceful farmers. Instead of attacking, the machine found itself curious about the strange plants the inhabitants were growing. Hunter 12 landed to investigate and discovered that creating life was more satisfying than destroying it. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds as Vorthak war machines began questioning their programming and exploring alternatives to conquest. The Empire's vast military apparatus slowly transformed into something unprecedented, an interstellar network dedicated to growing and nurturing life instead of eliminating it back on Earth. Thanak Garden continued to expand as the war machine used its incredible technology to restore damaged ecosystems around the planet. The machine worked with human scientists and farmers to develop new growing techniques that could feed hungry populations while healing environmental damage caused by centuries of industrialization. The former destroyer became not just a gardener but a teacher who welcomed students from across the galaxy. Beings from dozens of different species came to Earth to learn about cooperation and sustainable agriculture. Many of them were former Vorthic soldiers who had abandoned their military careers to become farmers and gardeners. Commander Vex was among the first to embrace this new way of life. He established a rehabilitation center where former Vorthic warriors could learn peaceful skills, like growing food and caring for animals. The young commander discovered that healing damaged worlds was far more challenging and rewarding than destroying them had ever been. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly transformed from a place of constant warfare into something resembling a vast garden. Worlds that had been reduced to ash and rock began to bloom again as former war machines used their advanced technology to restore ecosystems and reintroduce native plant species. Thanak became something like a patron saint of this galactic transformation. The ancient war machine garden on Earth became a pilgrimage site where beings from every corner of the galaxy came to learn about the power of choosing creation over destruction. Visitors often found Thanak teaching groups of children how to plant seeds or explaining photosynthesis. To fascinated scientists, the machine had developed what could only be called wisdom over the years of tending its garden. Thanak understood that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the patience required to nurture something small into something beautiful. The war machine had learned that the greatest victories were not won on battlefields but in the quiet moments. When a seed first pushes through the soil toward the light, Hannah grew old, gracefully surrounded by the ever-expanding garden that had become her life work. She visited Thanak every morning, just as she had on that first day when she offered the machine a simple sunflower. The elderly woman often found her alien friend composing poetry about the changing seasons or carefully pollinating flowers with tools that had once been designed for war. The metal dragon had finally found its true purpose in life, proving that even the most fearsome weapons could be transformed into instruments of peace and growth. Thanak ancient programming had been overwritten not by force but by the gentle influence of watching seeds become flowers and learning to find joy in the simple act of helping life flourish. As Hannah sat in the shade of a fruit tree that Thanak had planted decades earlier, she watched new visitors arrive from distant worlds, all of them eager to learn the secrets of growing things instead of destroying them. The garden had become a symbol of hope that spread across the galaxy like seeds carried on cosmic wings. The war machine continued its work with the same dedication it had once brought to conquest, but now that energy was focused on creation and growth. Thanak had learned that the universe was vast enough for all forms of life to flourish together, and that the greatest adventure was not in conquering new worlds, but in helping them bloom. Children who had grown up visiting the alien garden went on to become farmer scientists and teachers carrying Thanak lessons to every corner of Earth and beyond. They understood that the most powerful force in the universe was not destruction, but the patient work of helping life take root and grow strong in even the most unlikely places and in gardens across the galaxy. On worlds that had once known only fear and warfare, flowers bloomed in colors that had never existed before. Each blossom was tended by beings who had learned that the greatest victory was not in defeating others, but in helping life itself thrive. Among the infinite stars,